first of all, I'm really thankful for your acceptance for the interview. I hope I speak fluently because, of course, it is not my mother tongue, English. My mother tongue is Spanish. I don't know if you can, but you told me you can also speak some German, which is really funny.
Yeah. Yeah, not Spanish.
Okay, so can you tell us first something about yourself? First, how do I pronounce your name properly? Where are you from? Which is your mother tongue? And how was your dancing development? What did you study or where did you begin? So in short.
Right. So my full name is actually Yi Suki. So Yi is my surname. And yeah, so it's pronounced Suki. Sounds Japanese, but it's really not.
Okay.
Because I get that question all the time. Yeah. And sorry, what was the next question? Oh, I'm currently in Malaysia. I mean, I was born here. I'm a Malaysian, which is right, just rather near to Indonesia, which you mentioned here you are familiar with. And how did I get started in dance?
Yes.
So, and also, sorry, language-wise. So in Malaysia, because it's rather multicultural, so everyone here speaks both English and Malay. So Malay is the official language for Malaysia, but so English and Malay. And then I also speak Mandarin. Because, yeah. And then here there's a lot of other dialects too, which I'm less fluent in, like Hokkien or Cantonese. There's also Tamil, which I also don't really know, maybe a few phrases because of like friends. So yeah, there's a lot of languages happening here. I think it's very normal if you go on the streets or you go and any instructions anywhere, they would at least have 3, maybe 4 languages.
Wow.
Right, but I would say English is most comfortable for me. Yeah, and also in school, so most subjects would be in English or Malay, depending also what kind of school you go to.
So it was like a bilingual school.
Sorry?
It's like a bilingual school? Bilingual?
Yes. Kind of. I think it also really depends on which school you go to.
Okay.
So the government school, mostly in English and Malay. And then there were also years where they switched. So science and math in some years were taught in English and then some years in Malay, you know, like because of all this cultural sort of overlap. So, but I learned most in English. And then there are also certain schools that taught all the subjects in Chinese, and there were certain schools that taught all the subjects in Tamil. So there are so many school systems.
Oh my God. Really confusing for my very normal education. So, and your dancing development and initiation.
Okay, so I started dancing when I was 7. So I started with ballet classes as like a co-curriculum activity. And so then it was ballet, started with ballet. And then I think when I was a teenager, did a little bit of hip hop, did a little bit of not modern dance training. So I didn't go for like contemporary classes or modern dance classes, but there were these sort of programs under this non-profit organization called Acl in Penang, where they focus a lot on community and sort of cultural. So for example, we would, and I think I was like 12 or 13 back then, and we would go into, I'm not sure whether you've heard of Georgetown, which is like the capital of Penang. So it's very cultural. It's a UNESCO heritage site. So we go into the city and then we would look at the buildings, look at you know, and then we were learning about how histories and everything. So not just in buildings, but even in the way of life, right? Like how people would cook certain things or how they would sit on different kind of stools or chairs, and that would change the way they would, you know, hold themselves. And then so we were taking movements from all these sort of aspects of life. And I think you know, in a way that is contemporary dance in that it can be anything and then you can take inspiration from anywhere. But you know, I was 12, I didn't know what it was. I just knew that it wasn't ballet, and it was like, oh, it was super new, because you know, in ballet the movements are taught to you, and this is something that you create yourself. So Yeah, so I think that was sort of my first exposure into contemporary. And then I think maybe when I was 17, 18, after I finished high school, I studied Form 6, which is something like a pre-U, but I actually studied biology
Oh.
because I wasn't sure if I wanted to. I mean, I wasn't confident to go into dance, I think, at that point. So while I was studying, but I was still dancing, and then I was taking classes, joining productions, and then I decided that I want to do dance.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I did my degree in dance at Aswara, which is the Malaysia's National Academy of Arts, Heritage and Culture.
Oh, very interesting road. So, but now I will not follow my lead and ask another question, which wasn't
Yeah, sure.
prepared. But I don't know if you have had this experience that you are doing things like moving yourself in some ways, and you are not aware that maybe these movements or motions or even gestures come from your childhood, that you sometimes, oh my god, this movement was from my grandma, or I saw this movement in the people sitting somewhere, as you were saying about this experience when you were 12.
Yes.
So do you think this somehow unconscious memories in you, have you noticed if they influence somehow the movements you do nowadays?
I think it's hard to say for memories from my childhood, for example, because maybe they're very really far away, and it's maybe really hard to pinpoint. But I do agree that, and I do believe that there is this vocabulary in all our bodies, right? And
Exactly.
in the things that we do, in the things that we see, sometimes we absorb them, and without knowing, they are a part of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we dance, or even when you're not dancing, when you're doing something else, and sometimes these memories or these impressions on us comes out without us intentionally showing it. So I actually have a rather specific example that made me realize it. It's a short tangent story, if you're okay.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, for me too. So because I started mostly with ballet and contemporary, and I didn't know a lot of traditional dance forms, right? Even though in Malaysia there's a lot, and also because there's so many cultures. So when I was in Aswara studying dance degree, because the syllabus is very inclusive. It's very multicultural. So of course we do ballet and contemporary, we do theory classes also, choreography, improv, but we also everyone has to learn, for example, Chinese dance or Malay folk dance like Tapin, or Bharatanatyam, which is Indian classical forms. So there's so much information, and it's very, very different kind of forms, right? The feeling, the energy, the vocabulary, it was very, very new to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it took me, like, my first semester, I think it was really challenging for me to break out of what I'm used to dancing, because for like almost 20 years I've been dancing, or 18 years I've been dancing like that. And then now suddenly it's like having to rewire the way I
Yeah.
see that. So for example, if I take Zapin, which is or I think a lot of Malay dance are a lot softer, a lot more fluid, a lot more gentle. And it was hard for me to learn how to switch in a way to that kind of energy or that kind of
I
feeling,
see. Mm-hmm.
because I'm so used to, like, energy, like
Like to
so.
control your energy.
Yes, yes, and it's not less energy, it's a different kind of energy. But I think it was very important as a dancer for me to learn these different forms, so that even now, even though my practice is still mainly in contemporary dance, but I realize so much more the possibilities that can be, that there are different kind of energies that I can use, different kind of vocabulary. Yeah, sorry. So the story was, I think two years ago. 2 years ago, I was doing a residency in Lisbon.
Oh.
Um,
Uh-huh.
so I think most of the other dancers were Americans or Europeans. And it was completely contemporary, right? And then I think I was creating this short work, which to me is completely contemporary. I wasn't intentionally drawing from traditional elements. But I remember a few of the other dancers came up to me sort of separately on different occasions and asked me, like, is this from Chinese dance? Is this like, what elements is this? It looks very different. Like, where is your movement coming from? And to me, my movement was like, oh, okay, it's like normal to me, right?
Yeah.
And I was surprised that it looked traditional, or it looks different to them, even though my roots are not in that, right?
Yeah.
So even though I've only learned traditional dance, I mean, when I was doing my degree was about 3 years. So, and even though I wasn't intentionally deconstructing a traditional form, for example, but I think it's true. And somehow, so I started looking, I mean, for that, I think it was like a 2-minute solo or something. So I started looking at that set of movement and trying to think about why. And for example, if I show this movement to Malaysian dancers, I believe nobody would say that it looks traditional, because it looks completely contemporary to them. But it's just
see.
like, with this knowledge, or with this what we're used to seeing, and by comparison, or by this sort of contextual background, and then for me it was very interesting to see how people look at things differently.
Yeah, I understand perfectly. I mean, two things I want to highlight: this body vocabulary, which I found it as a concept really appealing, very interesting. And I believe I am really interested in psychoanalysis. And there's this idea about the, let's call them unconscious memories, in which you somehow have in a layer in your head some memories, but you are not aware of them. And then sometimes you find yourself repeating things, like, oh, again, I'm dealing with a guy like this, for example, or again, I'm dealing with a toxic person. Why do I always do that? So this repetition in a dance vocabulary would mean that our body, even though we are not aware of it, repeats some movements which we do not know. We don't even know that they are repetitions. You know what I mean? So that's why I think it's really interesting what you're saying about this vocabulary of the body. It has somehow its own language. And the other thing you said is about like the perception of the public of your dance. Like in Malaysia, you would be seen more contemporary. In Europe, you would be seen as a traditional, or not traditional, but somehow influenced by traditional dance. And I think that is I'm a philosopher, and that is very interesting in the sense that perception is not pure. It's not that I'm seeing something just like a color, and that's it, a pure color. But I'm seeing it through the eyes of my own experiences, of my own culture, of the things that have formed or configured my way of seeing and interpreting what I am seeing. So this example of you being seen by like different cultures, different cultivated perceptions, is amazing. That you, in Malaysia, you are more contemporary. Outside Malaysia, you are less. And to be honest, I was more used to watch European ballet, contemporary European dance. So seeing you was something completely different. It was like, I don't understand, but I like it. Or I like it exactly because I do not understand.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks to you.
and I mean, I think so. The body vocabulary thing. Sometimes I think it's like knowing a few different languages is also something I'm sort of familiar with, right? And like, so a few different languages too. You know how sometimes when you're talking to different people and you would switch between languages, and the way you would express yourself in these different languages would also be different. Or sometimes you want to use a specific word that is not that,
Yeah.
or sometimes you just can't think of it right now, and so your mind is sort of always jumping between these like language boards. And I remember one of our teachers, Nasara, he used to say, learning all these dance forms is having all these different dance languages in your body. And so when you're dancing, if you're aware, and hopefully you are aware, when you're dancing, it's like all these different vocabularies is having a conversation in your body.
I
So
see.
so sometimes it's not just, when I'm doing ballet, I'm using all these things, and when I'm doing Zafin, I'm using all these things, but it's rather, no matter what you're doing, all this knowledge and all this, even if you're not putting everything at the forefront, I'm not using all of things at once, but you have it in your body, and it's sort of like in the moment you choose what to use and what to, and it becomes very versatile, it becomes very fluid, for you to play with all these elements. Yeah.
So you somehow, the conversation is not just in one language, but you're speaking with yourself in multiple languages.
Yes.
Wow, that's crazy. Isn't it crazy for you, like, to be in a multiple world simultaneously? Something like that.
I think maybe because the culture here is really, you're so used to it in everything in life here. The food, the people, the languages, that you're just almost sort of like, sometimes I don't even realize. So for example, if I speak to someone who's not from Malaysia, sometimes like I'll forget and I'll switch languages, because when you don't think about it and you're like, oh crap, no.
So this is your everyday experience.
I believe so. I would say that, like, sometimes people ask what kind of language you think in, and I would say mostly English, maybe some Mandarin, and maybe some Malay. But it's hard to pinpoint. It's just, sometimes if you talk to yourself, then yeah.
I see. Well, I was asked also that question because I'm living in Germany, but I have Spanish lessons. I speak in English a lot of times. I do translations from Greek, so I'm always in this like switching. And somebody asked me the same, and I was like, I have no idea. I think I don't think in a language.
Yeah, just like thoughts on its own, independent of language.
Yeah. It's like I see things, so I don't know. Something like that. And now, going to the first question I had planned, is something I already told you in a way that I usually in your videos notice that you were at a corner, right? You told me it has to do with the corona and the pandemic and so on. But I think this the point that it has to do with corona makes it more interesting, in the sense that I have the feeling that corona making us stay at home and blah blah give us a sense of claustrophobia, like you are in a corner, like, oh my god, I cannot see the walls anymore, I'm tired of watching these corners and these walls. And there's like this idea that fear, anguish, feelings, dread, emotions drive us like to corners and to cling to walls, So I don't really think it's just a coincidence that you were at a corner. I think it expresses precisely these dreadful emotions nowadays. But that's my interpretation. But you tell me.
Right. So, okay, so practical reasons wise, because this is the only space where there's enough space for me to dance, right? And also technically we moved some furniture.
Okay.
So this is the space that I have. And I think also another thing, it has to do with where I'm setting my camera. But the furthest that I can set is, yeah, it's here, and my camera, on the wall, so that it's able to see me, and it's not like the lighting and everything is okay. So it's also a lot of practical reasons. Um, as for space, I'm not sure, but I think for me this space has become very important because it feels like a space where I can not necessarily be alone, but to be with like my body and myself, and to um, not be sort of having so many other things in life. And I think for a lot of dancers, maybe it's true the importance, and maybe for a lot of artists, having a space where you go in there and you know what you want to do in that space, and the space feels like it's yours, and you feel safe in the space to do whatever. Yeah, and also so honestly, which I think, yeah, maybe you mentioned in one of the other questions about my knee. So I had an ACL injury last year. So it's a ligament tear. So I had to do this reconstruction surgery last year, beginning of July.
Oh my
So
God, I'm sorry.
yes. Well, now it's been, yeah, slightly past 9 months, 10 months. But back then when I was dancing in KL, which is like the capital city of Malaysia, and then because of the surgery, in initial stages, I couldn't even walk properly after the surgery. So there was no point of me staying there when I couldn't sort of handle myself and get around. I couldn't dance. I was in a company there, right? So I couldn't dance. I couldn't teach. I couldn't really do anything. Which was why I came back to do the surgery and to do my rehab here. Yeah, and so I think also it was interesting to me how I never thought of using this space as my studio. Even though, of course, in the beginning I couldn't dance much and I was focusing mostly on like physiotherapy.
I see.
And then now, because of the situation, because of the quarantine, before that I had already started dancing, started teaching choreographing. But I'm always busy outside. And then now that I think when we first got the news that I think the quarantine was supposed to be only 2 weeks, so now it's been 8 weeks, right?
Yeah.
So, but it was only 2 weeks. But even then, I'm like, oh my God, 2 weeks. What am I going to do? And I think the only thing was that my first thought was I need to find a space where I can dance,
I
and
see.
this was like the best space. And yeah, I think honestly I don't know how I would have survived without it. Yeah.
So, but you have also a video you posted, I think recently. You said like in a comment on Instagram that you were asked like to participate in some kind of meeting of dancers related to the situation. So it's called like My Body and the Pandemic, or
Right. So I think that was on International Dance Day. So it was actually like so International Dance Day was on 29th of April, and it was supposed to be like a proper festival with like workshops and performances, which was, it has to be moved online because of the quarantine. So they asked a few people to sort of do a sharing session. So I did one on Facebook actually. So it was like a 20 minutes or so live video. So I was talking a little bit about my journey in dance, and then the injury, and then I was doing like the short improv which I posted on Instagram. So I think technically, so the festival didn't give us any guide. I mean, in terms of the improvisation, what you want to do is fine. And then I think that improvisation for me was, I feel like, because I'm with myself so much. And also, for example, when I'm in this space, instead of dancing with people, for example, I'm dancing with myself and, like the sun or the wind or the birds chirping outside. But I feel that there's this change in my sensitivity, maybe, or my perception, which is why, and also because of my recovery, I only started really getting back into dancing maybe beginning of this year, and even in the beginning, right? So like I think January, February, and now I'm not completely back to normal yet, whatever normal
Okay.
means, right? Yeah. Um, but I think in the beginning, for example, kneeling down or certain floor felt very uncomfortable on my knee. Sometimes nowadays too, right? Some days it would be more cranky, it would be more stiff, more painful. So it's just something that I'm constantly renegotiating and also monitoring on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, but so it was only during this time that I started dancing more and sort of started, because now I have all this time and also because my body is at the phase of recovery where it's safe for me to do most basically everything. So I
Oh,
was also
nice.
getting my body used to a lot of movements, which sometimes even though you have the strength because of physio and stuff, so the strength is there, but your body's just not used to it anymore, and it's like what is this?
So do
So
you have a scar?
yes,
Can you show it if
I'm
it
not
doesn't
sure
bother you?
no, I don't know if you can
Ah,
see it. So this
I have that one too, you know.
oh really?
Yes, but I don't know if you can see it, but it's horrible, mine.
Oh right, yeah.
I had
Yes.
that also somehow injured when I did ballet.
Oh,
That's
what
why
kind of
I'm really
injury?
interested in knees.
Right, you mentioned. Okay.
So
What kind of injury was it?
I don't know what's the name in English, but it's what did you say happened to you again exactly?
It's a ligament, so it's the
Yeah,
anterior cruciate ligament.
I
It
think
tore,
it's the one behind the knee somehow and crossing it.
crossing it.
Yeah,
Yes,
like from the football players. They always
yes.
get, yeah, I got that one too.
So it's the same, I think.
So your right knee,
Yes.
mine too. This is so funny. We are twins
Yeah.
in knees. But you went on. I couldn't dance anymore, but you had luck maybe that your operation was done properly, but mine was terribly done. So I had to
Oh,
be intervened like 5 times a year without walking. It was horrible, but it was
oh,
very
dear.
strange. Like you said, it's like a reborn knee or leg. It's really
Yes.
strange. Like, oh my god, this knee so stupid. She has to learn everything again. But I
Yes.
I never was a professional dancer and it wasn't my goal. So I just stopped dancing. Now I regret it somehow, even if it was just somehow a hobby. And
Yeah.
also because I was so sad, like for 5 6 years, I couldn't see a ballerina or I would cry. I was,
Oh
my
no.
knee. I
Yes.
was really upset about it. Now I admire it again. I'm okay with it. I can survive. But that's why I'm interested in the relation of injuries, suffering, and dancing, because that's a typical thing
Yes.
in dancing. I don't know if you know this movie, the about, oh my god, what's the name of the Black Swan?
Ah, yes. With
I
Minaj.
was
Right.
really happy about this movie because I think it's really true, a little bit exaggerated, but it's true that there's a lot of suffering, not just from your body, but also psychological,
Right.
or I don't know. So
Yeah.
one thing, like one sentence I thought about to make this a very mysterious way of asking the question was, so there's of course a transformation in your body when you dance. Like for example, in ballet, your legs open, right? And somehow I had the experience, even after years, I danced for a long time, and then after like 10 years, I started to do yoga, and my legs were open, and they were like, why are you doing this thing so strange? And I was, well, that's how my body learned to move. So I have like to relearn to put the knees back inwards. And so transformation, it's always a sad and sad process somehow, like a process which involves necessarily some suffering, right? And in this sense, dance transforms your body. Sometimes you notice it, sometimes you don't notice it, but there's some suffering in it, in any way you can think of suffering. So now that you tell me about your knee, which of course I didn't know, it's very interesting that you could give me some thoughts about what you lived in this situation.
I think transformation, I mean, I think there's like a negative and a positive side to it. So if we're not talking about my specific case, but just dance in general, yes, definitely it does transform the body, simply because you're training your body, right, to do specific movements at specific positions. And it's like what we said before about body vocabulary. So if you are always doing these things, your body is used to moving in certain ways. And it's like the typical, I mean, it's like those videos of like ballet dancers closing the car boot with their leg. And I do that too sometimes if my hands are full, and I would just like close the switch or something. And you don't even think about it because it's like convenient, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think it does, because flexibility, strength, stamina, it changes you. But I believe that happens with a lot of other, like even if you do yoga, for example, it does transform your body, and it changes what is normal or what is habitual to you. From maybe more psychological or like a mental aspect, I think it really depends on how you deal with it. So I wanted to quit dance a few times when I was young. When I was when I was maybe 9 or 10, I think. Because I wasn't the most flexible kid in class, and you know how it can be really stressful with everyone, like super flexible, and you're like, I don't know why I can't do it. And I think it was like nobody bullied me, and I wasn't made to feel bad or anything. But I think also maybe because it's just me, like you feel you're crap, right, basically. And then I think I wanted to quit a few times, and then I think maybe when I was 9 or 10, and then my mom said, you can't quit something just because it's hard. And I remember it was very interesting to me, because now looking back, I wondered how and I was like 9 or 10, right? I wonder how I had the self discipline. So what I did was, because since I couldn't quit, and then I decided, okay, you know what? So I'm just going to have to get better at it. And I remember waking up. So I usually wake up at 6 a.m. I think, and then to prepare and then go to school. And then by then I remember I set the alarm for like 5:45 every morning. And then I would get up and do like 15 minutes of like stretching and then go to school. And I think I did that solidly for a few months to a year, and without anyone prompting me, and just because I was like, I just need to, get this out of the way, because otherwise it's just going to make me feel bad. And then now nobody believes me, because everybody thinks I'm flexible, and nobody believes that I was like the kid who couldn't do a split. I think I could only do a split when I was like 11 or something, which is for a dancer, it's crazy. It's like, people do it when they're 5. um but I really think so that also for me is another kind of transformation. I mean, not just my
Okay.
body, of course, but also I feel like something changed for me inside, like I built this sort of thinking of, if I'm not good at something, there's no use sort of pitying myself
Yeah.
or feeling bad about it, but I just have to do something about it. And yeah, I mean, of course, now I look back and I'm like, I'm really glad I did that for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
see.
and now I think that has also always been my guide. I mean, in my practice. So even if I'm not particularly busy with rehearsals, or even during my rehab, I was trying every day to do as much as I can while being safe, of course. So always checking my physio. But once I can do this, I start doing it.
Yeah.
So sort of always, and also finding. I think during my rehab, especially, it was a very interesting and also rather trying time, because there's so much. You know, I wasn't sure about you, but like I couldn't bend my
Yeah,
knee,
I know that.
and it was so hard, because especially as a dancer, you're so used to just
Yeah.
being in any position, and then now suddenly you can't bend your knee. Like even sitting is like so
Yeah.
tiring for the lower back, because you can't sit cross leg. It was crazy. It was driving me nuts.
Yeah.
and and I think even in workouts or exercises, and I think also as a dancer thing, right? Like you're always so paranoid of. I was very paranoid of losing my flexibility,
Mm-hmm.
losing my strength, and of course my muscle deteriorated
Yeah.
quite a bit, because it's just. But I was trying my best to maintain it. So I was also finding out a lot of alternative ways to work on my body while
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't do my usual things.
Mm.
So yeah, so I do think it's how you take it. And I would say yes, it's painful. It
Mm-hmm.
was yeah, and like you say, right, another psychological thing. And sometimes you just get so frustrated, and you think of what you used to be able to do, and then now you can't even walk without limping. It was yeah, it was really frustrating. I think, yeah, that was just really hard. But at the same time, I had the same kind of determination, like I'll just work through this.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I would say from this that you said that you are somehow a second nature dancer, because there are these guys, which are just born and dancing and flexible. They are born for that. And there are a lot of normal people, let's call it like that,
Yeah.
who just can't do that, like from nothing. And I like very much that your determination helped you to make it natural, to make that something which wasn't something
Yeah.
innate in you, to make it like a natural characteristic of your body, which is amazing. The force, the determination, the effort put in these exercises you said that doing in the morning very early for my
Yes.
for my habits. But
Even now
that
for me.
yeah. And what I wanted to say, yeah, so you said at the beginning of your answer something about how the body has its own normality. Let's say like your normality is to switch off the light with your foot or something like that, which for
Yeah.
me would be completely impossible. I've tried like in crazy moments to act like a dancer, and I fall down, I break a glass or something happens.
Oh.
So not just when I drink a little bit, I do those things. But if I am in a normal situation, I try not to, because I know something is gonna break or fall down. So the relation between everyday life and art, which you blend in a marvelous way. As in the video, you have I will tell it a bit of the video. You have a video when you are where you are somehow preparing a tea or waiting for the tea to be ready, and then taking the cup of tea and drinking it with so much happiness that I wanted that tea. But I wanted your tea. I didn't want any tea. I wanted that cup of tea, which was full of happiness and, I don't know, energy. So I think this is strange, because normally we think the ordinary is not art. Art is something like that is separated from everyday life, that makes like a cut between everyday life and another dimension of the mind, or I don't know. But you have a lot of this kind of videos. You also have this cake video in a sort of cafeteria where you are eating this cake, also like, it reminded me, I don't know if you know the movie Beetlejuice.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, you have to watch it, because there's a moment in the movie where some people are trying to buy a house, but Beetlejuice is this kind of spirit or phantom or something like that, fulfills them from inside, like possesses them. So they are all sitting and they start to dance around the table, like without control. So it reminded me a lot of like, oh my God, I think I'm moving, but I don't know why. And I have this feeling in your video with the cake. You have also the pillow dance. Well, I don't know if that's the name, which is also really like, I'm not sure if you're waking up or if you're going to sleep, but I don't care. It was really funny. Well, funny and sad. It's double. You have also this window dance, like, oh, there's a window. What do I do? I dance. So this somehow expresses that you live that way. It's somehow your way of life, and you don't cut anymore so clear between ordinary life and extraordinary situations. So have you thought about it? Like, are you aware of that?
I think I'm slightly aware of it, because people would tell me that it's like, sometimes people would comment, right? Like they would think I'm a little bit crazy for doing it, or they think it's really fun, or they sometimes some people tell me they find it really inspiring and they say, I want to try to do that. And I would always tell them, go and do it. I actually think this came from improvisation, in my interest in improvisation, and also in site specific work. So I think personally, I like dance that is connected to life, because I think so much of dance is actually just being human. Like, especially if you look at I don't know, I feel like dance on its own is such a almost activistic human kind of nature to dance. So in every culture, in every places, there's all this, and also especially if you look at how all these different dances came about from all these different inspiration. So it's a bit like what I mentioned before, right? So for example, dances that are taken from the way that people were working, like, so people, farmers, so the vocabulary of the movements would be from there. Or even things like how people or certain cultures that are living on the hill or by the sea, like this kind of geographical locations would change the way that they would move because of the floor, because of the wind, because of the space. So I mean, I haven't done a lot of research in all this, but for me, it's just really interesting how these factors or these different elements forms or changes or influences how the people would move. and it's almost like a language on its own, right? So people would
Yeah.
talk, but sometimes they just want to dance and they just want to move to music, or they just want to move to everything that's going on around them. And I also feel that dance shouldn't be too separated. I mean, there are occasions where it's on stage. For example, I think ballet is quite elevated. It's quite, obviously not everybody can do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I also really like the idea that dance is for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
and that I would always tell people that, like, like everybody's a dancer, because anything is dance. And if you want to dance and you move, and whatever that you intend for it to be dance, is dance. And I just think, um, personally, right, I said I'm very interested in improvisation, and honestly, not always. I think maybe in the last 2 or 3 years I've gotten a little bit more into it. And one thing that I realize is, how do you and this is how one of my friends put it, but I think it's very apt, and I still think about it sometimes. She says, sometimes you get sick of your body, which I think is very true. Um, because you're so used to it,
Yeah.
and you have certain habits that you fall
Yeah.
into. So we were talking about normality, or what kind of body vocabulary is normal for you, which is fine. But sometimes if you're aware of it and you're thinking, why am I always doing this thing,
Mm-hmm.
So I think drawing inspiration from other areas in life can be very interesting. So whether it's tea or coffee, or even for me, sight, like the space.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a lot of my improv video before this quarantine would be at interesting buildings, or sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I just like the grass, or the trees, or like sometimes it's just the feeling of the place, or in that moment I just felt like I want to dance.
Uh-huh.
And I think, for me anyway, so much of dance comes from life. So it feels very, honest. It feels very different also, because there's no one watching. Well, there's the camera. But also because I'm not performing for anyone, not really. And it really feels like that's the main reason of dancing. You want to dance because you dance because you want to, and you enjoy it. And sometimes I think, as a dancer, or as a professional or full-time dancer,
I'm
it
sorry, but
can
I smoke.
there's no worries. Yeah, sometimes it can be hard to remember why we dance, because you get caught up in the technicalities of it, and you're always thinking, I need to do this better, I need to do this better.
Yeah.
There's so much more I don't know, which I think, of course, is important to keep improving yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But also sometimes, just thinking of, why do you dance in the first place? And I remember, also, one of my lecturer, that we were studying our dance degree. So I think a lot of people are really stressed, right? Because there's always so many classes, so many assignments. And then he says, yeah, but you always have to enjoy dancing, because if you don't enjoy dancing, you might as well get a job that pays.
Why
So,
would you do that?
exactly, why would you dance and suffer? You don't enjoy it. And artists don't get paid. So he say, we get paid by our passion, or because we enjoy it so much, and you would want
Mm.
to do it anyway, and you are driven to do it because of this passion, or this fire, or this enjoyment. So he says, but if you don't enjoy dancing, then yeah, don't dance,
Get
just
some
go get
money.
like a job. Exactly. Be practical.
I see. This is really nice to hear, because I'm writing my thesis in philosophy about, well, part of it is about movement in Aristotle. So in ancient philosophy, the way they understood motion in general. And
Wow.
one of the questions which is really interesting in Aristotle is, why do we move? Which is the motor, what drives us to move towards something? Even a little, I don't know, rabbit to move towards a fruit or whatever it eats, right? So what? But you mentioned the answer. in your last answer. And the answer for Aristotle is desire. Desire moves you. It's like the prime motor in living things that keeps them alive. And being alive for Aristotle is like summarized in one word. What does it mean, life, for Aristotle? To move. That's the definition of life. And you said before you studied biology, which is really funny. It's like, are you connecting everything like consciously, or it's just like a coincidence in your life that everything is so well harmonized somehow? And I can feel that when you dance. I feel harmony, even though in this video you posted about the International Dance Day, I just couldn't stop watching your knees. I was driven to your knees because it looks so painful. I thought, oh my God, if I did that, I would just die and scream and, oh mama, where are you? Please hug me. But I don't know if while were you dancing, were you aware of your knee? This is a strange question, but I want to know.
I think it has become a habit for me to be aware of it because of, you know, after this operation, you know, I'm always having to, well, in the beginning it's simply because it couldn't move much, for example, or it feels weak, or it feels unstable, or it feels, yeah, so or it's painful, or I can't straighten it, so, you know, it just screams for attention every time I move.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for example, in that video, like now when I'm dancing, I don't feel it much. I think only when on my bad day. So
Okay.
sometimes it's stiffer and I try to lock my knee. For example, if I try to do a pirouette or I try to balance on one leg, then sometimes it feels a bit uncomfortable. But mostly, yeah, mostly it's fine. But of course, I think I am still already sort of automatically aware, you know, sort of having this background chat in my head to always, you know, be safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
think
is that a new thought, like be safe since your injury, or it's a thought that you have had before?
I think yeah, I think it's rather new. I would say that okay, I wouldn't say reckless, but I was quite like I would just
Mm-hmm.
go, like I think it was hard for me, and even now, right, and my new question is, how do I know good pain from bad pain?
I see.
um you know, like as a dancer, it's so normal for you to push through pain, because sometimes it's just your muscle being sore,
Mm-hmm.
or, you know, it's just, for example, even stretching for flexibility. So there's so many kind of okay pain that you just have to deal with, and then there are pain that is telling you that something is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
um, and sometimes I think it can be hard to tell which one it is,
Mm.
and especially if you're used to pushing yourself, which I think I was. So, you know, always when I'm tired or whatever, and you think, you know, and physically you feel okay and mentally you feel okay, and you just want to kind of challenge yourself. But sometimes your body is not, yeah, it's not okay anymore. So I think that's just something that, yeah, recently I would definitely be more aware of. Certain days, especially for my knee, if it feels a bit weird, it feels,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and then I don't want to risk it, and then I would, okay, yeah, you know, be smart. Yeah, rest it for today. If you need, or do other movements that doesn't strain it so much. So sort of always having this negotiation with my
Yeah.
knee about, yeah, how it feels,
Oh,
right?
but you said very nicely there's like a good and a bad pain. And which is further difficult to distinguish one from the other. Is this pain like positive for the future, or is it negative for
Yeah,
the
yeah.
future? do you think there's a way, like a method to distinguish what is good and what is bad in painful terms?
I think it's really hard also because sometimes when the pain comes, I mean, I think with experience, eventually because you get used to knowing, for example, how does it feel when a muscle is sore, which is an okay kind of pain, and what kind is when you strain it or you pull it, it's a different kind of pain. But I think it's really hard sometimes when you first encountered this kind of pain. It's hard to tell what it is. So of course, the best, if you're not sure, is always to consult like a physiotherapist or a doctor or someone, just to be sure and to know whether you should rest it or what can you do for it. And then I think, yeah, with experience, eventually you get a sense of how it feels like to you.
Yeah.
And sometimes these things are really, really hard to describe. You say like a sharp pain, but there's like so many types of sharp pain. So yeah, it's hard.
Yes, it's very, this is like another vocabulary, right? Like there are, now in Germany, when I go to the doctor and I have pain somewhere, I had a very strange thing, and I had a lot of pain in the feet. And I couldn't explain it. It was just like standing, and I felt a pain in the feet. And I went to the doctor, and she told me, is it a sharp? And she started like mentioning like 10 words, and I have no idea. How should I know this vocabulary? And how should I know, I understand each word, but I don't know what does it mean related with pain and how it feels, a sharp pain or a kind, I don't know. I don't remember all the vocabulary, which is somehow very poetical, right? Like all these qualifications of pain, which have a real connection with the physical reality. And now that we're talking about all these painful things, let's go to more happy things.
Yes.
So I mentioned, well, I commented in your Instagram, that was my first encounter with your existence, that I was surprised with the way your hair was waving while you were dancing. I was, wow, even the point of her hair is moving, like the last centimeter of her self is like dancing, and it looks as if she's controlling every hair in her head.
Oh my God.
And I was, that's it. Somehow I saw you and I understand now what is dancing. It's like I cannot say it. I don't know, wait. It's like be able, an ability to move in a rhythmical, harmonized way, everything at the same time, like even your teeth, even your gesture, if you are expressing happiness or sadness, or if you're angry, or there's thousands of nuances, of how do you say that in English? Nuance is a word. Yeah. Yes. That you are transmitting even with the hair. And that's what I found it interesting. Like philosophy, that is my dimension. You just have words and you have to do everything with words, which is, it seems easy. But at the same time, dancing can be more flexible regarding language. You have a lot of means to transmit different things at the same time, even contradictory things, like you have some videos where your feet are doing something and another person is moving like the torso. So you are combining maybe a happy movement with a sad movement, which I find really nice. And now regarding your knee, I always believe everything can be used in a meaningful sense, even bad things. Like sometimes good dancers are good because they have a failure or because they have a defect, they have a problem. or good writers can be blind, you know? And that's amazing. It's like they're using these problems in a positive way. So it's a very complex question, but the idea is everything dances in you, even these defects, these issues in your body are dancing. Let's say it like that. How you know that?
I think it's the first time someone described it that way. I mean, to every part of my body is dancing, which I think is a really huge compliment. So thank you. Um, I think I'm not sure, but just personally, I try to really be connected to my body and my mind and myself when I'm dancing. So I mean this in that, and perhaps it's also like what you said earlier about how I'm dancing in every situation, right? With pouring tea, wherever. I think it's sort of rather related in that when I'm dancing, it doesn't feel like I'm changing. It's not like, you know, I'm Suki and then when I'm dancing and then I become this dancer and then I dance and then I go back here. It doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel separated, which I know for some people maybe it can be. But for me, it's a lot about trying to be as honest with myself when I'm dancing, whatever that means. And of course, I think sometimes it's still a struggle, right? What does it mean to be honest? What
Yeah.
is the self? But what I mean is, I remember, right. So this is also something that a lecturer when I was studying, he said, and I really remember this because I think it's so important. So he said, so if you're dancing today and you're doing this set of movements, and you do it like for 10 days, right? And it should look different for all 10 days because on all 10 days you're a different person and you feel different, and it's very important to acknowledge that. So if I'm dancing today and for example, if you know I have an injury here or it feels stiff or something, I shouldn't ignore it, which I think maybe some dancers do, and I think maybe I did do that too. You know, you have an injury, you ignore it, or you feel bad and you ignore it, and then you just, okay, I just have to be a dancer in this space. But part of being a dancer is being human. So then it becomes, okay, my right shoulder feels painful today, but how am I going to work with it? And, you know, acknowledging it and working with it rather than pretending it's not there. And I think that is, of course, in a very physical sense. So, for example, my knee, you know, okay, it doesn't feel very good today. What am I going to do that feels good for my knee or feels safe for my knee? Or even in an emotional aspect, you know, if I feel sad today, it's okay to dance when I'm sad. It's okay to feel, even if I feel like today my dancing sucks and I don't like it and I think I'm being so boring, which sometimes it happens. But you know, rather than ignoring that feeling, acknowledge it because it's all part of the process. And acknowledging that feeling, I believe gives you a way to deal with it is one thing, and it also gives you a different kind of dimension, because you know when you're feeling different things and then you move, for example improvisation or in any movements really, it changes the quality of your movement. And it's not like, oh, you know, I want to be melodramatically sad. It's not that, but it's something very subtle. It just changes. It's the same thing for non-dancers. You know, a person sitting, a person who's really happy sitting on the same chair, a person who's really disappointed. You know, like there's this small shifts in how your muscle was holding, how your joints, your posture. And I think learning how to dance with all of that is really, maybe that's why, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not really sure, but I think that's just something that's really important to me, to acknowledge life in its totality, and it is every aspect, which maybe has influenced the way I try to
Mm-hmm.
find dance in everything. Maybe.
So I think we are ahead of time, but I don't care. So one last question.
Yes.
So this word you use, honesty, in my philosophical environment, I always ask myself, because, for example, there are crazy thoughts in ancient philosophers, like there's a fifth element called ether, which was the element of the stars and it's a very strange, and there's people writing about it and trying to understand what Aristotle, for example, meant with this very mysterious element, divine element, whose motion is circularity because like earth goes down, air goes up, and so on. But this element is moving in circles. It's like the perfect movement for them. So I ask myself, do they believe in it, you know, when they write about it? So the way you understand dance, it's not about like believing. It's like, of course, that's like supposed, it's like presupposed. Of course I believe what I'm doing. It's not a question. And this is like related to this honesty. Like, I'm not putting my dancing mask in order to do a nice performance. I'm like authentically performing, even if it's somehow a contradiction, because you are performing but not performing. You know,
Yes,
you are not pretending, you are really performing. You are completely in this role, which at the same time is not like a overlapped role over your normal life or personality, but it's the same, but maybe in another environment.
Yeah.
So how would you say you yourself, I don't want like an academic definition, but I want you to tell me as the last answer, how do you understand dance? Which you have already mentioned in a lot of ways, but in short, how could you say it?
I think dance is intention. Like if just one word, it would be intention. Um, Simply because I really do believe that dance can be anything, um, and it's really hard because now, even if you look at dance and then you look at dance theater and then physical theater, you look at performance art, and it's sometimes, you know, with all these categories and all these labels, it's really hard to use definitions for things, and then it overlaps with something else. You know, if it says movement, but you know, Zumba or a workout or push-ups is also movement, but then it's not dance, or some people wouldn't call it dance. But if you put the push-up in your dance, then it's dance. So I think it's really the intention of the person or the whatever, the being. You know, if the intention is to dance, and then it's dance. Even if dance, you know, okay, the intention is to dance, and then the intention to dance has so many things, right? To perform, desire, or so that is, I think, another question. But you know, the first thing is the intention.
Okay, I like very much this word intention, because it has to do also with intense, you know, it's like an intense way of moving. Yes. Concentrated.
And I think that was one of the, right, I was talking about learning traditional dances and learning, right, and I said how it's not a lower energy, it's a different kind of energy. And yeah, so one thing that we talked a lot about is intensity, you know. So some dancers, they can move really slowly, but they're so mesmerizing. And there's just this intensity that is, you know, and not just dancers, actors, performers.
Yeah.
Some people just have that, right? They just have this focus, this energy that is sort of like growing out of them, even if they're not like, you know, calling for attention. And I find that very interesting. And I find that I believe that yes, it comes from this intensity or this intention, because when you're very clear what you're doing. So if my whole performance is just, you know, picking up a pencil, but I do it for like an hour or whatever. But because I am so intent on doing it, and I am very clear with what I'm doing. How am I picking up the pencil? Why am I picking up the pencil? Why am I taking an hour to pick up the pencil? So when you're clear with that, I think the audience, even if the audience may not understand it, but they see your intention. And I think this intention is also like desire, right? And I think this is something very, very human and it's something you can't fake. So you can't pretend. So even if the audience don't understand it, but they can see that it's real and they can somehow relate to it. Yeah. So I think that's why it's important for me.